Hey everybody, Dev here. So for a large part of my game's development, I've been stuck using the same 3 enemies: a 3 HP melee enemy, a 3 HP ranged enemy, and a 5 HP enemy that randomly picks between melee or ranged. I know, it's a very interesting enemy roster. It's actually incredible that playtesting this game has never put me into a medically induced coma. To be fair, I've been mostly focusing on designing player skills. I actually wanted to make a video on that first, but you know, I don't really like the way the game looks right now. Hello, I'm a programmer, and this is my art. Right here, this is my art. We shifted from top-down perspective in the last video to an isometric one, and I also got a few sprites a friend made for his older game as placeholder, but we still don't have animations or VFX at the moment. I'll let a few friends handle stuff like art and sound, since I'm mostly on the game design and writing part. But because player skills are so important, I feel like when I'm showing them, they can't solely be interesting mechanically, but also visually and in terms of game feel. So that's why I'll leave player skills for another time. Instead, let's focus on enemy design. But how do we design an enemy roster? Well, my only successful experience with designing enemies is a tower defense game called Fish and Chips. I got 2 friends to help, and we made it in 8 days for the Fish Fist Game Jam. We even won 3rd place in the fun category. And I'm not saying successful because of the placement rank, I'm saying successful because everything else I've made either doesn't have enemies or I just stopped working on them. Let's check the Fish and Chips enemy roster. We have the basic enemy, high speed low health, low speed high health, and high speed high health. And then I copied the first 3, buffed them, and changed their colors on a sprite. A lot of you probably clicked on this video without knowing what blue light is. Which is, to be fair, the channel is tiny. If I started posting porn, it would probably take YouTube 2 business days to notice. But if you're new here, hi there, thanks for watching. Let me give you a short introduction of my game. By the way, if you like the content, please join my Discord server. The link has the word fun in it. Blue Light is a turn-based tactics game where enemies evolve every turn. Currently, evolve means they can gain more skill slots, so if an enemy has 1 skill when you leave it alone, it'll have 2 skills on the next turn. This means that even the weakest enemy in the game can still pose a threat if you leave them alive for long enough. I'll add more on this later in the video, but if you want more details, you can check out my last devlog. I want to start by making the first 2 enemies a bit more diverse. I'm thinking since the melee enemy feels more like a frontline bruiser type, we'll boost its damage by 1. For the ranged enemy, we'll give its attack the push keyword. Push basically pushes the target by 1 tile. If the tile is occupied like this, then both characters involved in the collision take 1 damage. This is of course a very unique mechanic that has never been implemented in any tactics game ever. I'll also reduce its health to 2 to give the cast a bit more variety. Also, I'm going to add a 3rd basic enemy. This one's a melee enemy with a longer range. It's the only one of the 3 that can hit multiple targets, so we have a pretty simple trio. I'll also copy these 3 and make stronger versions of them because higher tier enemies are pretty important. But they should also feel familiar to their lower tier counterparts, so that's why I'm mainly just changing stats instead of giving them new skills. Alright, now that we have some basic enemies, we can start playing around with some more unique ideas. Here are 3 design guidelines I came up with. I'll go through all 3 in detail, and then we can design the best enemy that fits all 3. Let's compare the shotgunner and the imp from classic Doom. Both enemies have low health. They both die from a single shotgun blast, but the imp shoots a slow-moving projectile, while the shotgunner shoots hitscan bullets, which is an attack that you can't dodge. So the shotgunner has a higher threat level than an imp, and if you're playing optimally, you'll prioritize killing the shotgunner first. Now that you know what threat levels are, I want you to hear my pitch. Okay, you know how the puppet from FNAF 2 works, right? The music box meter pi thingy goes down. If the meter is empty, the puppet kills you. Hello everyone! So you have to open the camera and wind up the music box to fill it up. This is your only defense. You can't stop it from going down by itself. Knowing this, your next thought may be, man, I really want to kill the puppet from FNAF 2. This is Rumna. Rumna is like the puppet, except you can actually kill it. To explain how Rumna works, I have to go through a bit more detail on gameplay. So enemies will reliably telegraph their next attack. If they have 3, they'll use all 3 this turn, but they'll also show you where their first one is going. The other 2 are unknown for now. We do have a mechanic that makes this a bit easier, the clock. Every time the player plays 4 actions, all enemies on the board will play their attack, specifically the current one they're showing. After that, they'll also show where their next attack goes, which makes it a lot easier to play around. The limit to the amount of actions you can play per turn is tied to the F each character has. Basically it's mana or action points or whatever. That's why the evolution mechanic quickly becomes a threat. Eventually, your team will have enough F to cycle through all their actions. But let's push this even further with Rumna. While other enemies may demand your attention by the end of the turn, Rumina will demand your attention within the 4-action window. This is Rumina's skill. The skill itself doesn't attack, but the threat lies in the effect. On use, it deals 1 damage to all enemies, regardless of their position. The enemies in this case are your characters, by the way. But it also has the channeling keyword. Just like the puppet, where you have to wind the music box to prevent it from killing you, you have to deal damage to Rumina to cancel its skill. A couple months ago, I had a few friends playtest the build, and one of them mentioned that the entire game was just a DPS check. Which he is kind of right. Again, we only had 3 enemies at the time, and for every enemy, the optimal strategy was just, let's kill him. Yeah, kill this guy with hammers right here. Basically, you deal with every enemy the same way, which is going to get stale after a few hours. That is, unless we encourage players to deal with them differently. So here's a simple way to fix that. We can make something happen when an enemy dies. For example, let's say the enemy blows up. This way, positioning matters when the explosion happens, so it's not just how to kill, it's also when to kill and where to kill. This is a really weird video. You know, while we're at it, let's throw in your preferred payment type and whether you want it to look like a suicide or an accident. Now, I'm aware that an exploding enemy is not exactly a novel idea, so I figured I should showcase something more unique. So meet this... You know, I haven't come up with a name for her yet. Skill is a normal melee attack, but it comes with a special status effect. If it dies, and there are other copies of the board, the other copies will become enraged. They'll change their skill set and also gain more attacks. So, instead of the optimal strategy being just kill, the game now encourages you to spread out damage so you can kill all the copies in a single turn. A pretty important aspect in Blue Light is that the game has friendly fire. This does apply to your squad, but more importantly it also applies to the enemy. So the idea of using enemies against each other has been baked into the game from the start. So here's a simple enemy idea. This enemy uses a multi-hit melee attack, but the gimmick is that every time it takes damage, it gains a permanent damage boost. So it seems the ideal way to deal with it is to kill it before it can attack. But remember, friendly fire. Maybe the best way to deal with this enemy is to deal damage until it's heavily buffed, keep it alive at low health, and keep baiting it into hitting other enemies, which sounds like a war crime, but I think this is a pretty solid enemy that fits very well with the idea of allowing an experienced player to use enemies to their advantage. And I should note that these guys are still a threat. Remember that they still evolve, and eventually they're going to overwhelm you if you don't deal with them. Alright, so now that I've explained the guidelines, let's try to design an enemy that fits all 3. Sorry, I lied. It doesn't kill the player in real life. It's not actually that threatening of an enemy, or at least I think it isn't, but it does fit the 3 guidelines, and also, I like it. So here's how Hot Potato Guy works. That's not his name, it's a placeholder name. He has a ranged attack that deals no damage, but inflicts you with a bomb. The bomb works kind of like in Hot Potato, so it explodes at the end of the turn, and if you hit someone or something, you'll pass the bomb to them. When it explodes, it deals a lot of damage. 2 damage is a lot in this game, I swear. Again, it's not a threatening enemy in the same way like Rumina is, but it also kind of works. Being hit by its bomb attack doesn't even do damage to you, so it's a pretty low threat enemy. In fact, a lot of the times you want the bomb, because it's easy to give to another enemy and blow them up. You can even send it back to Hot Potato Guy if you really hate his guts for some reasons. So a lot of the times, the optimal strategy may just be walking into his attacks. I know he's kinda goofy, but I think he's an interesting character that will hopefully make it to the final release. Then again, you have to remember that they do still evolve. So if you're playing with fire and planning to keep him alive, you'll have to figure out the right time to put it out. Okay, so I decided to do a bit of playtesting after I finished editing this section, right? Turns out, I might have been a bit too generous painting him as a confused little guy that was just trying to help. I mean, look at his face. As I continued playtesting, I would often find myself either not having enough F to pass the bomb, or sometimes after placing a bomb, he would target one of my characters that ran out of F, and I was getting increasingly frustrated trying to prove my point. The point being that walking into his attacks was an effective strategy. But after a while, with little success, I took a step back, realizing now that he's definitely much more of a threat than I expected. Well, turns out, taking the bomb and passing it is an option, but I mistook it as a plan A. After more experimenting, I found out that in a lot of situations, it's more effective to trick him into placing a bomb on an enemy, rather than taking the bomb yourself and then giving it to a target. You know, saying it out loud makes it sound really obvious, like what is this, the fucking postal service? This won't be the last enemy I'll design, of course. It was mainly just one that follows the 3 guidelines, but I hope you found it as interesting as I did. I had some new ideas while writing the script, but we don't really have the sprite nor the time for it. Maybe you'll see me explain it in a later video, or maybe you'll see it when the game comes out. So that's about it for this video. I want to thank you for sticking to the end, and I hope you liked the enemies I showcased. If you want to share ideas for enemies, or just anything you want me to add, feel free to leave your suggestion in the comments. You know, I originally had this outro section to be about foundations on turn-based tactics design, but I'm rewriting and re-recording because I want to share some thoughts on the project without having to worry about, like, structure. Okay, so I want to go through my plan for Blue Light and F in general. I already talked about this in my last video, but I'll share it again and add some more details. So I want to release a commercial game, and it's going to be called EPHLOG, but I don't know if it's good enough because I've never released a commercial game before. So that's why I'm working on Blue Light first, and it's going to be free and most likely open source. I want to get more people to play it so I can see which parts are good and which parts I should just remove, so that when I make EPHLOG, I can take the refined combat system of Blue Light and add it to that game. And EPHLOG will have a strategy layer. That's what makes it different from Blue Light. Blue Light is level-to-level based. What you do in one level does not affect what happens in the next level. In EPHLOG, you have to go through a series of stages, so kind of like a dungeon. What you do in one level can affect what happens in the next level. For example, if your character gets hit, maybe their morale decreases. That's just an example. And you get to pick upgrades between stages, so there's another layer of strategy to that. And we'll figure out a way to make it make sense in the story. And speaking of story, I think I mentioned in my server that EPHLOG takes place before Window to My Room, which is a visual novel I worked on, which is almost a year old now. And I can promise that at least one returning character from Window to My Room appears in EPHLOG. And Blue Light will use the same characters, or the same major characters as EPHLOG, so you'll be seeing them very soon. Either way, thank you for clicking on this video, and thank you very much for watching.